Martin Seligman, who is known as the father of positive psychology, has what he calls the 3 W's. That every day, at the end of the day, you should ask yourself the 3 W's. What went well? You know, as we are finishing the year 2020 today and looking forward to midnight when we will begin 2021, there are many people who are excited to say goodbye and good riddance to 2020 and turn a new year in the calendar. However, I think today is precisely the day that we have to ask ourselves, what went well? You know, someone said to me that from now on we should, instead of saying the proverbial, you should live to 120, we should say you should live till 121, because the year 2020 didn't count. But the truth is, despite all the terrible things that happened, and there was so much death and tragedy and heartbreak and financial ruin and many other calamities during this past year, today is the day we also have to look back and say, what have we learned? What have we gained? What were the positives as a result of this year, 2020? So I would like to point out 5 things that I will be grateful for as we enter into 2021. But let me begin with a little Dvar Torah in this week's Torah portion. The very moving story of Joseph's brothers returning to the land of Egypt after the burial of the funeral of their father Jacob. And they're fearful that Joseph will take revenge for what they had done. And they fall before Joseph and say, our father asked that you forgive us. And Joseph begins to weep because he knows that he had forgiven the brothers a long time ago, but they still fear that he will take revenge. And he says the most powerful words. He says, am I in the place of God? Hatachat Elokim ani. You intended bad, but God intended good. Yes, you had ill will and ill intentions towards me when you threw me in the pit and sold me into slavery. But God had a plan that I should save the land from famine. Joseph looked back at his life and he didn't focus on what went wrong. He focused on the 3 W's, what went well. And he was grateful for that, and that overrode and outshined all the negativity in his life. However, the question is, what exactly did Joseph mean when he said, am I in the place of God? Hatachat Elokim ani. And the Rabbi Barditcheva says a beautiful interpretation. He says the word tachat could mean, am I in the place of God? Meaning, who am I to judge you? God had a plan. But it also could mean, am I underneath God? And Rabbi Barditcheva says that what Joseph was saying to the brothers was, I'm not beneath God, I am a part of God. And therefore, I am capable of being infinite like God. And just like God is loving and forgiving and overcomes all adversity and challenges, I have that infinite part of God that I could rise above the hurt and the pain and see my godly potential to be the one to provide sustenance as a part of God to an entire region and save them during times of famine and to forgive my brothers. And I think this year more than any other year, we feel that way. When we enter into 2021, usually we celebrate, but this year we feel that we've accomplished something. That we not only survived during 2020, but we thrived. We had a flood of love towards one another, caring for each other. And not only that, but there were the first responders, the doctors and the nurses who risked their lives to save others. We came together in a way like never before, and we could be proud of our accomplishments in this past year. We're not just beneath God, we are partnering with God this year more than any other year. And so here are the 5 blessings, or at least 5 of the many blessings of 2020. The first one is that I read a statistic that in Israel, in the 72 years of Israel's existence, this was the smallest number of casualties and fatalities due to war or terrorism. 3 people were murdered due to terrorism, 1 soldier and 2 civilians, including Esther Hogan just last week, who was stabbed 6 times, a 50-year-old woman jogging who was with 6 children who was murdered. But 3 deaths as a result of war of terrorism is the lowest figure in 72 years of history, which again indicates that we are capable of living with each other in peace and in harmony, and not, God forbid, 3 lives is 3 lives too many, but we're going in the right direction. The second blessing that just happened this week was Jonathan Pollard, after 35 years, finally realized his dream of coming back home to Israel. And I say this is a blessing because this was a grave injustice a miscarriage of justice, because Jonathan Pollard served 30 years. There's never been a spy for a U.S. ally that ever served more than 10 years. But now he and his wife are home in Eretz Yisrael. The third blessing, of course, was the Abraham Accords, where 4 Arab countries entered into peace accords with Israel, which is going to transform the Middle East as more and more countries will learn to live in peace with Israel and say to the Palestinians, it's time to stop your hostility towards Israel. The fourth blessing, of course, that occurred during this year was the outpouring of love for one another, the genuine sacrifices that everyone made to care for each other, to give to each other, and the coming together like we've never seen before of our global community. And I'll just say, even in our local community, through Zoom, we've been blessed that the number of participants in classes have tripled, quadrupled even, as a result of Zoom. And no longer can we only connect with our local community, our members, wherever they are around the world. We're able to tune into the Zoom classes and programs and be a part of our global community. We realize more than ever that we are all interdependent and all interlocked with one another. And finally, the ultimate blessing of 2020, which was the vaccine that was produced. And not only was the vaccine produced, and we started to see the distribution of the vaccine throughout the world, in the United States and Israel, in the year 2020. But as Jews, we could be very proud that the CEO and the chairman of Pfizer, it was the first company to produce a vaccine, is a proud Jew by the name of Dr. Albert Bourla. And Dr. Albert Bourla is a proud Jew who is married in a synagogue, who is proud of his Jewish heritage. He's a practicing Jew, and he was appointed the head of global vaccinations, and then ultimately last year in 2019 became the CEO of Pfizer. And he led this effort and determination to be the first company to bring a vaccine to the market that will save the lives of millions of people around the world and bring an end to this pandemic. But I want to tell you something very remarkable, which is very positive and hopeful and optimistic for the future. And it's very much like the story of Joseph and the brothers. You know, the story of Dr. Albert Bourla is that he comes from Salonika, Greece. Now, Salonika, Greece was one of the very thriving Jewish communities because after the Spanish expulsion and the Spanish Inquisition, thousands of Jews went to Salonika and made it a very thriving, prominent Jewish community. Before World War II, there were over 60,000 Jews in Salonika, Greece. The Nazis came, invaded, and sent the Jews to Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. And 50 out of the 60,000 Jews were sent to the death camps. Only 10,000 Jews survived. And 2 of the survivors were the parents of the CEO of Pfizer, Dr. Albert Salonika, and he was born there in 1961. He rose to become this great scientist and physician and ultimately became the CEO of Pfizer. But what I find remarkable is that when he set out in March to find a cure for this pandemic, a vaccine, he partnered with a German company called BioNTech, and they are the partners in the production of this vaccine. So imagine a son of survivors, a son of Holocaust survivors, partners with a German company that murdered 95% of the community from where his family comes and creates a vaccine to save humanity. This is like Joseph rising to become second in command in Egypt and saving the land of famine. This is the story of the Jewish people. We look at what we can do positive for the world. We rise above the hurt. We do not hold anger or hate, but we say, how can we make the world a better place? And as Jews, this is the message of Joseph and the modern message of Dr. Albert Salonika. I want to just conclude by saying that the number 21, which we're starting tonight, 2021, is unique for many reasons. But one of the reasons is, if you take out your Chumash and you look at the first letter of each of the 5 books of the Torah, and you add up the numerical value of each of the letters, of the first letter of each of the 5 books of the Torah, it equals 21. And let this be an omen that in the year 2021, we should return to our Torah values, to the values and the ethics and the morals of Judaism, to be that light unto the nations, just like Dr. Albert Burla was and is, and just like Joseph was in Egypt. And then, God willing, the year 2021 will be a year of great blessings for the Jewish people, for the world, and for each and every one of us. Wishing you a happy secular New Year.